Welcome to this, our first of our two-part tutorial. My name is Matt Lacey, and in this first tutorial we're going to be looking at what is a query parameter and how can we find out a list of the query parameters that are generated by our website or content management system. And in the second tutorial, which will be coming shortly, we'll then look at how you can decide which of those query parameters can be safely excluded and also how you might go about doing that in Google Analytics. Before we log into Google Analytics and start to pull out the data that we need, we'll just have a little look at some of the background at what a query parameter is and why you might want to exclude them. On this slide we can see three different URLs, and these are the kind of URLs that might come up within your content report within Google Analytics. Now the first example is what we're really aiming for, and actually the second and third examples give you the page address plus a string of query parameters and their values. And what we're hoping to do through the process of identifying and then excluding certain query parameters is to make all the URLs more readable, like the first example. Here we can see some sets of parameters and their values, and these are actually taken from the full URL strings that we saw on the previous slide, and this is really to understand how the parameters are clustered together with their values. So this shows you some examples where you have NLPQ, and that is the parameter in this case, equals body plus warmers, and that is the value in this case. And as we start the process of identifying query parameters, I will just mention that there are other ways of doing this, including running macros in Excel. And the reason that we do it this way is because we found it is the most reliable and it works across a greatest range of operating systems and software. So that's the reason we do it this way. And in terms of time, it will easily be completed in the time of this video. So once you're practiced at it, you'll be able to do it in under 10 minutes. Now that we've looked at some of the background on query parameters, let's move over to Google Analytics and look at how we can export the right data. First, you'll need to log into the Google Analytics account for the website on which you want to determine the query parameters. Once you've logged in and you come into the dashboard, we're going to move to the left-hand menu and select Content. Once we're in the Content menu, we'll move and we're going to go to the sub-menu and choose Content Drill Down. Once we're in the Content Drill Down report, we're going to go to the very bottom of the page and we're going to use a filter. And what this will do is remove any URLs which do not include query parameters. So if we put into the filter page containing box / and question mark, and we can now go and press go. So now that that filter is complete, if we look down in the bottom right hand corner of the page down here, we can see that we now have 163 rows of URLs within the Content Drill Down report. Now in a tip we're going to look at in a moment, it will show you how you can export up to 20,000 rows from Google Analytics. So actually, in order to make sure that we've got a comprehensive list of all the query parameters that might be used, it'll be beneficial to use a larger sample size. So what we're going to do is move up the page and go to the date selection range here, and if we press that, I'm just going to use the timeline, and rather than just using a data from a month, we're going to grab this and just pull it down and use data from a larger range of time, and that will really depend on the data that your site records. It may be that you have enough in a couple of months, or it might be worth doing it over a year, that kind of thing. Now that that's finished loading, if we move down to the bottom, we can see that rather than having 163 rows of data, we've got 17,774. And by using a data set of this size, we're much more likely to come across a complete or exhaustive list of query parameters used by this site. So now that we've done that, we need to use this little trick to make sure that we can download all of those 20,000 rows. So I'm going to go up to the address bar and click in the address bar. I want to go right to the very end. So the cursor's at the very end, and what I'm going to add is an and sign followed by limit equals 20,000 and hit the return key or enter. Okay, and now that's done, we're going to go up to the export button and click on that, and we're going to export it as a CSV file for Excel. So now that we've exported the data from Google Analytics and opened it up in Excel, the first step is to delete some of the information that we don't need. But before you do that, it might be worth saving the file locally so that if anything goes wrong during this process, then you can always go back to that step. So as you scroll down here, you can see that we get a lot of information about the individual dates, and as we look across, we get information about page views, unique page views, and so on. And we're actually not interested in any of that data for the purpose of what we're going to do. So let's just delete some of these columns. So I'm going to drag across and select those, and right click and delete. I'm going to do the same moving up from everything above where it says page. Let's drag right to the top. I'm going to do the same, right click and delete. And that now gives us the list of the URLs that come from Google Analytics. The next process, what we're going to do is separate everything before a question mark from everything after a question mark, because we've already identified that the information before a question mark relates to the page, and the information after the question mark is the query parameter string, and that's actually what we're searching for here. So the way we're going to do this is if we select column A, and we're going to go up to data and text to columns, and we're going to stick with delimited. So if we click next, and it may sometimes come up with tab selected. You want to uncheck that and make sure the only box checked is other, and we're going to use a question mark in that box, and we can click finish. And what that will do is separate into two columns every instance where there's a question mark. And actually, because we're interested in the query parameter strings, we can now delete column A. So right click and delete. And while that's still selected, I'm going to go to data and filter and auto filter. And that will bring up these little arrows at the top here. And if I click on those and go to sort ascending, that will just sort it into an order so that we don't get the gaps that are left. Column A now contains a list of all the query parameter strings, and that may be, for some of the URLs, that will be more than one set of query parameter and its value. And as we looked at earlier in the tutorial, when that happens, they'll be joined by an ampersand. So what we're going to do now, so that we can separate any strings of query parameters, what we're going to do is select A again, and in a similar process to what we've done before, if we go to data and text to columns, choose delimited, and this time we're going to use an ampersand, and if we click finish, okay, and what that will do now is separate out into different columns anywhere where there are more than one query parameter. So I think here, if we go a little bit further down, you can see that we have some in column A, some in column B, some in column C, and as you go down through the whole list down to the very bottom, we've got over 17,000 entries. So, but you can see all the way down to the bottom we have these different query parameter and value clusters in different cells. So what we're going to do is select the whole group of query parameters. So I'm just going to drag across a little way, and I'm going to use Command Shift and down, and and that should take me around to the bottom. On a PC, it's Control, Shift, and down, and that takes me right through to the final entry. And then I'm just going to go to Data, Filter, and turn off the auto filter, because column A already had a filter, so that's now been removed, and we're now going to filter the whole lot. So if we go to Data, Filter, and Auto Filter, and now we've got these little arrows for each column. So if we click on the little arrows for column H and do sort ascending, we can see that there is one query parameter that's got that is in that column. And what we now want to do is move all the query parameters into column A. So first I'm going to do a cut, so Command and X or Control and X, and I'm going to go right down to the bottom, and at the end of column A I'm going to add it on here, and I'm going to continue to do that for each of the columns until all the columns just have one, until we have all the query parameters in column A. So now that we've completed the process of cutting and pasting all the query parameters and their values into column A, the next thing that we're going to do is separate the query parameters from their values. And the way we're going to do this is in a similar way that we've done before. To select column A, go to Data and Text to Columns. And this time we're going to use, rather than the question mark or the ampersand, we're going to use an equal sign, and that's because we know, as we've already looked at before, that in the structure of query parameters we have the query parameter equals value, and we're only interested in the query parameter. So if we put in the equal sign and click Finish, that should separate those out for us. And now that we've got that, we can delete column B because we're not interested in the values, so right click and delete. And now in column A we have a full list of all the query parameters. And the final thing that we need to do now is, at the moment you can see there is a large amount of duplication, and what we're going to do to deal with that is, if we click on the first entry and Command Shift and down on a Mac, or Control Shift and down on a PC, and what we're going to do is go to Data and Filter, but this time we're going to use Advanced Filter. So once we've selected an advanced filter, the main point that we need to get here is to check this box that says Unique Records Only. So we're going to select that and click OK. And once that's finished processing, what we should get is a list without any duplication of the full set of query parameters. And so to summarise briefly, we've had a quick look at what a query parameter is, what it looks like, and hopefully that would have helped you to understand why it's preferable to exclude some query parameters in Google Analytics. We've looked in Google Analytics at how to download the necessary data from which you can find the query parameters, and we've moved into Excel, where we've deleted a lot of unnecessary information and finally isolated the query parameters that we need. So moving on to the next tutorial, which will be with you next month, we're going to look at, once you have a full list of the query parameters that your website or CMS generates, how you can determine which can be safely removed, and also how you would then go about applying those within Google Analytics. So I hope you found this useful. If you have any comments, then please feel free to add them below.